Welcome to this explainer. If you're a medical student looking for a really high-yield microbiology lecture on typhus and rickettsia, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're taking some incredibly dense, handwritten microbiology notes and translating them into a crystal clear clinical framework. Oh, and since we're dealing with a lot of complex medical terms today, I highly recommend keeping the captions and subtitles turned on so you can easily catch the exact spelling of everything we talk about. All right, let's dive right in. Picture this. Your board exam throws a case at you. A patient comes in with septic shock and disseminated intravascular coagulation, or DIC. You do what you're supposed to do and run the standard panels, but their blood cultures come back completely 100% negative. This is the classic diagnostic mystery we're solving today. What in the world is hiding in this patient's bloodstream? Well, the answer is actually buried right here, inside these comprehensive notes on rickettsia and typhus. We're going to completely decode this wall of handwritten text today. The goal is to extract only the absolute must-know, high-yield facts to build your mental map of rickettsia, so you know exactly what to do when you see it. Here's our quick roadmap for the explainer. Number 1, the clinical hallmark. 2, agent and transmission vectors. 3, pathogenesis from bite to shock. 4, differentiating typhus subtypes. And finally, 5, diagnosis and treatment. Okay, section 1. The clinical hallmark. Let's unpack that patient mystery we just talked about. This right here is the presentation you must absolutely burn into your brain for your exams and honestly for your future ward rotations. Listen closely. If you have a resident or a traveler from an endemic area presenting with septicemia, septic shock, or DIC, and those blood cultures are inexplicably negative, boom, you need to immediately think of typhus. Moving on to section 2, agent and transmission vectors. Now we know what the illness looks like when it hits rock bottom, but who's the actual culprit? The pathogen causing all this chaos is rickettsia. Now, the major buzzwords you're going to see on exams are that rickettsia is an obligate intracellular agent. What does that mean? It means this bacteria literally cannot survive or multiply unless it's inside a host cell. Plus, it's a zoonotic disease, so it jumps from animals to humans, with the primary reservoir being rodents, specifically mice. So how does it actually get from a little mouse in the wild into your patient's bloodstream? Through a vector. Basically, a tick bite. After that tick bites, the patient is going to have this totally asymptomatic incubation period that lasts anywhere from 3 to 21 days before things go south. You should have a super high index of suspicion for patients with very specific risk factors. Think of a wildlife photographer, an avid mountain hiker, or maybe someone who just got back from a really intense jungle safari. Section 3. Pathogenesis. Let's trace the mechanistic flow here, from the initial bite straight to systemic shock. It's really like a terrifying domino effect. First domino, a tick bite on exposed skin, usually hands, feet, face, or the neck. Once inside, the Rickettsial pathogen specifically targets and attacks the blood vessel walls, which causes vasculitis. This local injury creates a black, crusted ischemic ulcer at the bite site. But it definitely doesn't stop there. The bacteria goes systemic, causing widespread vessel wall injury all over the body. This massive, widespread endothelial damage triggers consumptive coagulopathy, that's your DIC. The body essentially uses up all its clotting factors, so the patient starts developing severe bleeding tendencies, like purpuric rashes and GI bleeds, which rapidly spirals into septic shock and, if you don't catch it, death. Because of how fast this progresses, finding the physical clues early is a total game changer. The number one physical manifestation on the skin that you need to actively hunt for is the eschar. An eschar is this black, crusted ischemic ulcer forming right where the tick bit them, and it usually comes with massive constitutional upset. We're talking high fever, splitting headache, just severe malaise. Spotting an eschar can completely crack the case wide open for you. Okay, section 4, differentiating typhus subtypes. Rickettsia isn't just one single monolithic disease. It actually has several distinct subtypes, and you've got to be able to tell them apart based on their unique rashes. This breakdown is incredibly high yield. It literally all comes down to exactly where the purpuric rash begins. Epidemic typhus, that starts right on the trunk and spreads outward to the periphery. Rocky Mountain spotted fever starts on the hands and feet and spreads inward toward the trunk. Tick typhus begins in the axilla or groin. Murine typhus is classically tied to coastal areas. And Rickettsial pox gives you this variegate rash that looks a whole lot like chicken pox. Let's zoom in on the most tested concept here, though. This is absolute board exam bait, so pay attention. You have to be able to distinguish between epidemic typhus and Rocky Mountain spotted fever, or RMSF. Just remember the directions. Epidemic spreads outward from the trunk to the periphery. Rocky Mountain spotted fever spreads inward, starting at the hands and feet and moving toward the trunk. That directional spread is the golden diagnostic clue. Now, there's one more subtype that throws a wrench in things: scrub typhus. If your patient is crashing with multi-system issues, like they've suddenly got myocarditis, pneumonia, hepatitis, or splenomegaly on top of everything else, your brain should immediately pivot to scrub typhus. It hits multiple organs and it hits them hard. Finally, Section 5, Diagnosis and Treatment. We know how it works, we can spot the rash, we've got the diagnosis. Now, how do we actually save the patient? So remember our hook from the very beginning? Those blood cultures are going to be completely negative. Why? Because Rickettsial is obligate intracellular. It absolutely refuses to grow in your standard hospital blood culture broth. Because of that, serology, where you're testing the blood serum for antibodies, is your primary go-to investigation. But here's the catch. Do not wait around for those serology results to come back before you treat. Your immediate action, especially if they're crashing into shock, is aggressive resuscitation. You follow that up immediately with doxycycline. The standard, highly tested dosage is 100 milligrams taken twice daily, that's the BD abbreviation, for a solid 14 to 21 days. Doxycycline is absolutely the drug of choice here. And what about prevention? Say you need prophylaxis for someone traveling into a highly endemic zone or dealing with a confirmed tick bite. The rule here is super simple to remember. The protocol is exactly the same as it is for Lyme's disease. All right, let's wrap this up with a final thought. If a patient walks in with a black eschar and a purpuric rash starting on their hands just a few days after a big mountain hike, are you going to catch that diagnosis of Rocky Mountain spotted fever before consumptive coagulopathy kicks in? Always, always keep an eye out for those early hallmarks: the tick exposure history, the eschar, and the specific directional rash patterns. Intervening before systemic shock takes hold is literally the key to mastering Rickettsial and saving your patient's life. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and good luck with your studies.